What's up, everyone? I'm Nick Raboy, and in this tutorial, we're going to see how to add cheat codes to your Unity game. So, for example, maybe you have a game that you're building and you want to be able to allow the user to do a certain keyboard combination in order to unlock unlimited lives or etc. This is what we're going to see in this particular tutorial. Now, we aren't going to see how to add unlimited lives, but we are going to see how to register and keep track of keyboard input history using a variety of techniques. And we're also going to take a look at inputting that Konami cheat code, so that iconic cheat code that was in the 90s, 80s. I don't know the exact date time frame, but it was very popular and well known. So up on my screen, you'll notice that I do have Unity open, and I do have a project that has already been created. So this is a very basic boilerplate project. So you'll see that I have a sample scene, I have a camera, I have a controller, which is just an empty game object. I have a canvas with two text items, so text display items. So the first one being the keystroke history. So this is what's going to appear at the top of the screen. And then the actual cheat code text, which is blank right now, but it's going to pop up when we enter a correct cheat code into the game. And then the event system comes with the canvas. So that's nothing that we added manually. So that's all we have so far. What we're going to actually do is we're going to create a script and we're going to attach it to this controller. So within your assets folder, go ahead and create a new scripts directory. And then within that directory, go ahead and say create and say create C# script. And what we're going to do is we're going to call that controller. Now let's go ahead and open up controller in your editor of choice. My editor of choice is Visual Studio Code, so that's what we're going to be using, but it's totally up to you what you want to use. So this is our kind of boilerplate script. This is what you get when you create a new script with Unity. We're going to actually explore two different ways for registering that keyboard or keystroke history to be used for our cheat codes. So what we're going to do first is we're going to wipe out everything that's inside of this controller class. Now we are going to add some of it back, but it's best to start with a clean slate so that way it's very readable and easy to follow. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to look at our options when it comes to registering just keystrokes, not keeping track of history, but actually determining which key was pressed without manually having to say, well, if input.getKey equals blah, blah, blah. We just want to be able to print out what key was pressed. So let's start by saying void OnGUI. So this is going to be our first method that we experiment with. So the OnGUI method. Now inside of this method, we could actually get what kind of events have occurred. One of the events being, well, was it a key event? And if it was it a key up, a key down, etc.? And what was the key code that was in combination with that event? And it's actually quite easy. It's just a few lines of code. So what we're going to do is we're going to say event e equals event.current. So the current event. Now we're going to do if e.isKey. So if it was a key press of some sort, and we're going to say and e.type. We want to see if in particular this event was a key up event rather than maybe somebody's continuously pressing a keyboard key or something else. But we're going to say event type dot key up. And if that's true, what we can do is we can say something like debug.log, and we're going to say e.keycode.toString. And what that's going to do is it's going to print out the particular key code to our console log. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Unity again. Right now, this script is kind of dangling right now. It's not attached to any game object. So what we want to do is we want to attach it to the controller. Let's go ahead and drag it over. So we have our controller script. And let's go ahead and run our game and see what happens. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the console, and I'm going to start pressing some keys. And as you can see, inside of my console, it's registering all of those key presses. Now, when it comes to the OnGUI, even though it's working fine in the play mode or this preview mode, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same results when you build for, say, Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, etc. Because the OnGUI method, what happens is that method can run up to 2 times per frame. Now, because it can run up to, that means that you don't really have control over how many times exactly it's going to run. So when I press the up key on Windows, when it's completely built and not in this preview mode, that up arrow might register 2 times. It might register no times. You don't know. So this kind of unknown behavior isn't probably the best choice when it comes to key codes. So we're going to look at another option. So let's go back into our script. And this time around, we're going to use an update method and a simple loop to get the job done. Now, of course, it's going to come with its own kind of disadvantages in comparison to what we saw with the OnGUI. But you're going to have to use your best judgment to determine what is the best scenario or the best usage of entering cheat codes or keyboard keystrokes for you. So I'm going to comment this OnGUI method. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use the update. So we're going to say void update. Now, what I could do is I could do all of this detection inside of the update, but I find it to be a little nasty to include it in there, even though it's just a few lines of code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another function. So this function's sole purpose is to determine what key was pressed. So we're going to say private. We're going to say it's going to return a key code, and we're going to call it detect key pressed. Now to do this, we're going to have to loop through each of the possible key codes and then compare it against our actual input and return basically a Boolean to see if that particular key was pressed. Rather than having to do a switch statement or an if statement that registers all 100 plus possible key code variations, we're going to use a loop. So what we're going to say is for each, we're going to say key code key in enum dot get values type of key code. So we're going to loop through all of the possible key code combinations. And there's more than 100 of them. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but there's quite a few. And what we're going to do now is we're going to say if input dot get key down key. So we're going to see if the particular key in our loop iteration is being pressed. And if it is, we're going to go ahead and return it. Otherwise, just so that way our loop doesn't, or our function doesn't throw any kind of errors for not being able to return anything, we're going to say return keycode.none. So that means no key code, no key was pressed really, but there is actually a none key code identifier. And this is going to be very important to us when it comes to our update method. So if nothing was pressed, we're going to say return the none key code. So now inside of the update method, what we can do is we can say key code, and we can say key pressed equals detect key pressed. So that's going to detect if we're pressing any kind of key other than basically that none, which is still going to return if nothing is pressed. And what we want to do now is we want to say maybe debug.log, and we're going to say key pressed.toString. And this should give us similar, if not the same results as our OnGUI. So let's go ahead and check it out. So we'll notice that we have 2 errors here, one of which because I used an incorrect capitalization character. So it's not lowercase k in key code, it's uppercase. And we're going to look at see what this enumeration error is as well. So let's go back into Visual Studio Code. I'm going to make this a capital K. And this looks right. But maybe the error came down to line 26, and maybe it'll correct itself real quick. So let's go ahead and save it, and we're going to debug as we go along. So let's take a look at that other error. So this other error has to do with the enumeration, and as far as I can tell, we did this correctly. So it wasn't related to line 26. So the reason why enum isn't working is because we forgot one of our imports. And we could have easily said system.enum, but you know what? It's just a little more clean to say using system as one of our imports. And that should actually make things work for us. So let's go back into Unity. And we're going to clear. Oh, actually, it's still running. So let me stop running it. I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to say run. And we're going to see what results we end up with. So you'll notice that none is continuously printing out because no keyboard entry is actually being pressed. And I know it's quick, but I'm actually pressing keys and they're popping up very fast. So let's go ahead and change our code slightly to accommodate this none keyboard entry. So what we're going to say is we're going to say if, we're going to say key pressed, and we're going to say toString not equal to none. But we could easily also say if key pressed not equal to keycode.none, and we'll get the same results. So let's go ahead and use that instead. And as long as it's not none, we should be printing stuff out. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. And I'll clear our console. And we're going to hit run. It should not print out infinitely like that. All right, so there's no constant printout. So let's go ahead and check it out. I'm going to hit the up arrow. Oh, it detected my mouse, which I guess is fine. But we could probably isolate that and make sure that it doesn't detect those if we really wanted to. But I'm pressing keys, and it's registering them just like they did with the OnGUI. So not too bad. So let's go ahead and stop this. Let's go ahead and go back into our code, and let's start accumulating a history of key presses and actually register a cheat code. So that way, if you wanted to add something interesting, like some kind of Easter egg to your game, you absolutely could. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and first say using Unity Engine.text before I forget. So that way we can actually use text within our script for our UI. And let's go ahead and create a new variable. This variable is going to be a list type. So this list is actually going to store every key press. And we're going to limit it so it doesn't do like infinite key presses. We're going to set a finite number of history to track, but it will be stored in this list. So what I'm going to say is private. I'm going to say list. It's going to be of type string. And we're going to say keystroke history. We're also going to create some public variables while we're at it. So we're going to say public. We're going to say text. Let's go ahead and say keystroke text and public text. And we're going to say maybe cheat code text. And those are going to represent our two text items within our scene. So that way we can edit them. We can add some text with our history and make it more visually appealing. All right, so let's go ahead and initialize this list. We can do that inside of the awake method. So we're going to say void awake. And within the awake method, what we're going to do is we're going to say keystroke history equals new list. And this is going to be a string. So that way we have something to append items to. All right, so we're currently detecting key codes. So let's go ahead and add them to that list. So I'm going to do that in a separate function, just so that way it's a little more clean. And we're going to say private void. We're going to say add keystroke to history. And you can call this function really whatever you wanted. We're going to say string. And we could still be using key codes if you really wanted to. But really, I find it more pleasant to work with strings in this scenario. And you'll see why shortly. But we're going to say keystroke. And we're going to add each keystroke to this list as long as it's not none. So we're going to say if, and we're going to say not. So the exclamation point there, we're going to say keystroke dot equals, because we're comparing strings, and none. We don't want it to be the none keystroke, which we detected on line 28. So that will save us some time. But if it's none, what we're going to do is we're going to say keystroke history dot add. We're going to add the keystroke. And we're also going to limit the number of history items that exist in this list. So we're going to say if keystroke history dot count is greater than 10, we're going to say keystroke history dot remove at, and we're going to remove the first item in the list. So we're just going to remove the oldest item in the list if we exceed 10 characters. Because for this example, the Konami cheat code is only 10 characters long. That's what we're using as the baseline. So if it's longer than that, we're just gonna remove characters. So we have the add keystroke to history. So what we can actually do now is up here from line 28 through 30. Let's go ahead and comment that out. And let's go ahead and say that we want to do the following. So let's go ahead and say that we want to say add keystroke to history, and we're going to say key pressed, and we're going to say toString. So now it's adding it to the history if it's not none. And the next step is we need to see what's in our history to see if a cheat code was actually entered. So let's go ahead and create another method for that. And these methods that we're creating right now, they could be used with the OnGUI if you didn't want to use the detect key press method that we used with the loop. So it's totally up to you. So what we're going to say is we're going to say private. We're going to actually return a string, and you're going to see why this is very valuable to us in just a second. But we're going to say string. We're going to say get keystroke history, or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to say return, and we're going to say string.join. So we're going to convert our list of strings into a comma delimited string representation of that list. So the delimiter character is going to be a comma, and we're going to say keystroke history dot to array. So we're converting the list to an array, and then we're joining that array, separating each item with a comma. So get keystroke history. So with that, what we can do is now we can go back into our update, and we can say something like if get keystroke history dot equals, and we can provide the actual cheat code there to compare against. So in this case, the Konami cheat code is the following. So it's going to be up arrow, down arrow, down arrow, left arrow, right arrow, left arrow, and then it should be BA. And if this doesn't work, I may have to double check on that. That's the correct Konami cheat code. I believe that's it. Up, up, down, down, left, right, left. Up, I forgot the right in there. So that should be the Konami cheat code. And if it is, we can actually do the following. So we can say cheat code text dot text equals maybe something like Konami cheat code detected. So if the keystroke history equals this particular string, this is our cheat code, then we can do something. Maybe add infinite lives or do whatever you want, whatever makes the most sense to you. What we can also do is we can also display our keystroke history. So maybe outside of the loop, above it, we can say something like keystroke text dot text equals, and we can say something like history, and then we can say get keystroke history, which is already going to be a string, and we can save it. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So text does not exist in the namespace. So let's go ahead and see what error I did. So I'll go back in. I think I did, yeah, unityengine.text. It's actually unityengine.ui. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to go back into my Unity editor. So I no longer have any errors. Let's go ahead and run it and see where we end up. So we have all kinds of errors now at runtime, and there's a reason for that. It's because we added the keystroke text and cheat code text to our script, but we never assigned them. They were public variables, so let's go ahead and assign them now. So we're going to say keystroke text. I'm going to drag it over into the correct item. And same thing for cheat code text. And I'm going to save it. And I'm going to clear my log, and I'm going to run again. And we should be problem free. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, left arrow, right arrow, A or DF, A, T. So you can see that they're all being added. So let's go ahead and start entering that key code and see if it works. So we're going to say up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A. So Konami cheat code detected. And you'll notice that up in the history area, the first items in that list are being removed as that list becomes too large based on our 10 keystroke limit. So we just saw how to add cheat codes to our game. So we added them to a overlaying controller script. If we go back into our code, We saw two different ways. Now, when I first tried to do this, I first tried to use the OnGUI, and it was working fantastic inside of the preview editor. The problem was when I actually built it for my Mac and Windows computer, it was registering too many events, and that is not good because cheat codes are very sensitive when it comes to what the keystroke combinations are. So that didn't work for me for this particular scenario. That's why I went with the detect key pressed. I looked at all of the possible key codes to see which one I was actually pressing. And then I just added those keystrokes to a list and compared that list against the cheat code that I wanted to use. So it's really not that bad. And you don't have to add it to a controller script. You can add it to any script you want or any game object you want. I just felt like it was the most clean to use it in that sense, but it's totally up to you. If you like this video, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that like button on the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, drop me a comment with some of your favorite cheat codes, if this tutorial worked out great for you, etc. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Happy coding.